All right, so we're out here in nature to talk about the next pillar in the 69 pillars of success, the frameworks that you need to understand in your mind to start achieving the destiny that you want to live. And ultimately, my best way to help you take command of your life and achieve your destiny. Out here in nature to make one very simple point. It's not the strongest or the smartest who survive, succeed, and win. It's the most adaptable. And that's something that's very interesting because we believe that the people who win are always the most beautiful. We believe the people that always win are always the most talented. We believe that people who are insanely successful had successful parents, or they were insanely lucky that they got discovered at the right time. And what you really understand when you dig a bit deeper than that, and you think about how nature actually works, none of those things are actually the truth. And we can go all the way throughout the corners of history to understand. Matter of fact, let's go back all the way to ancient history and talk about a guy named Moses, right? This is a dude who was born during a mass genocide, okay? He was born during a time where the king of that age, or the pharaoh, was murdering, aborting young children because of the fear, young male children, because of the fear that if they didn't control the Hebrew culture that lived in Egypt at the time, they were outnumbered and could be overpowered. Moses survives that, ends up being raised in the halls of the pharaoh. All right, actually he ends up being raised by his mother, who gets brought in by Pharaoh's daughter, I believe, to provide his upbringing because he was a Hebrew child. He wasn't obviously Egyptian. But fast forward to the future, Moses grows up, he murders a guy. How's that for a start? Murders an Egyptian dude and then goes into hiding because he's afraid of the wrath of Pharaoh. Finds himself on, a pagan farm basically with a guy named Jethro, who is Ethiopian, marries his daughter, and then gets a message from God that says, hey, homeboy, you're going back to Egypt and you're going to be my messenger to set the entire place free, to free them from the captivity of Egyptian rule. And Moses responds, wait a minute, I murdered a dude and I can barely speak. I have a stuttering speech impediment. Why am I the dude you're choosing for this, right? So Moses, by far, I assume at the time, was not the most insanely skilled person at making that reality a reality. A person who's fearful, who lies, who murders people, also has a speech impediment. And his whole job is to go speak to the king of the land. But he adapts. He uses other people who are in his camp, namely his brother, to help him do his thing. It's not the strongest and the smartest who survive and win. It's the most adaptable. And he, realizing his weaknesses, reaches out to his brother and his sister to fill those gaps so that he could do what he's uniquely skilled to do. But again, it's not that he was the strongest or the smartest. He wasn't by any stretch. In fact, Jethro, after Moses does do his thing and sets everybody free, and Moses is the king of the new land, Jethro has to come tell him, his father-in-law, like, hey, homeboy, the way you're ruling your people sucks. You're doing all of it. You're providing judgment for everybody. You can't do that. You need to make lieutenants, people under you, who can dole out judgment to the people to help them live good lives. So he wasn't the smartest by any stretch. Michael Jordan, let's use him as an example. He's the best basketball player, arguably, that ever lived. I know there's people screaming at the screen right now the words Kobe Bryant or LeBron James. That's fine. I don't even like basketball, so I'm happy to lose the debate over which one of those three is the best person that's ever played. But let's go ahead and accept the fact that he's at least in the top 10, if not the best player that's ever lived, and recognize that his sophomore year in high school, he was cut from the team. Okay, everybody knows that story. What most people don't know is that when he was drafted by the Chicago Bulls from the Carolina Tar Heels, when he was drafted, they told him, dude, your jump shot sucks. Your jump shot sucks. So what did Mike do? He didn't rely on his talents. He understood that his talents would only take him so far. He started taking 1,000 jump shots a day. And in fact, I think his rule was that he had to make 1,000 jump shots a day. which if your jump shot sucks like mine, that could take a very long time, but it got him to the point where he stopped missing jump shots. He realized that he wasn't as strong as he could be, and he adapted. In fact, Michael Jordan is going to come up in a couple of these videos, especially the humility video down the road, where he's often hated on for being arrogant, but when you talk to his teammates, they say he would listen to anybody and accept counsel from any of the players. Steve Kerr was one of those players who wasn't anywhere near the best player in the world, but when he would give Mike advice, Mike would take it. Mike's response was, I'll take anybody's advice at least once, even if I think they're wrong. Maybe they see something I don't see. That's being adaptable. Right, so you got Michael Jordan, you got Moses, and you can go, the list can go on and on with people who have become insanely successful when they weren't necessarily the best or the most talented. I mean, if you look at the top of the singing game right now, I bring Beyonce up quite a bit. Is she the best singer that's ever lived? Well, skill when it comes to singing is somewhat subjective. I think you can make some objective arguments about being able to sing notes properly. She doesn't have any problem with that. But I imagine there's many people across the world who don't think she's anywhere near the best singer. But she's been the most adaptable. You know, or I think a better example is Madonna. Madonna's by no means the best singer in the world, but she has adapted herself to the culture for going on 40 years now, I think. Yeah. For over 30 years, she's been making music and been at the top of her game, selling out stadiums and convention centers everywhere she goes. I mean, she's basically the Michael Jackson of women. To this day, in her 60s, I believe. I believe she's in her 60s at this point. Could be off by the numbers, but the point is, it's not that she was the best, it's that she was the most adaptable. She was the most willing to make changes in order to get the success that was important to her. And I think what a lot of you are running into is you're looking at people that are supremely successful and saying, oh, well, that person's really smart, or that person's really strong, that's why they're winning. And it's not necessarily the case. I mean, take me, for example. One of the compliments I get a lot on YouTube and on Facebook is that you're an insanely insightful and intelligent person. These people have no idea that I got C's in school. You want to know why I appear intelligent? It's because I hang around other smart people. It's that simple. I'm smart enough to realize on raw IQ, I'm not one of the world's brightest people. Okay, and of course, I would not argue that getting C's in school is really any measure of intelligence. It's a measure of how poorly I read and memorize things. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't do well in school. I didn't do terribly. I was okay. Like I said, I was average. But I wasn't insanely insightful and intelligent and wise. I'm just smart enough to realize that I'm dumb enough to need to learn from other people who are smarter than me. That's why when I'm filming in my house or in my office, you see that I have hundreds, if not thousands, of books around me. That's because I understand those people are smarter than me, and if I read what they're saying and I listen to what they're saying, I'm going to become a much better person for it, right? It's not the smartest. It's not the strongest who win, who survive, right? You look at animals in nature, that's part of the reason why I wanted to film outside. Animals are not insanely intelligent beings, but the ones who can adapt to their environment are the ones who end up surviving. The ones who don't make mistakes like putting themselves in position for a predator to capture, kill, and eat them. They're the ones who survive. And so how does all of this apply to your existence, your life, your career, your relationships? Well, you've got to get it out of your mind that because you weren't blessed with Einstein-level intelligence that you're just doomed to be mediocre. It's not true. You can actually outwork your lack of talent. You just can. Now, I don't mean that if you naturally suck at something, right? I think we're all wired to be at least marginally great at something, right? That's the way I think we're all wired. So you are wired to be great at something. Part of it is discovering what that something is. Go back to the first 2 videos in this series if you need help with that and refresh it. But at the same time, you can overcome some of your shortcomings by just a willingness to adapt, a willingness to work. You take a person like Will Smith. who, I don't know if you all are aware of this, but one of my favorite TV shows growing up as a kid was The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I watched that show religiously, and I loved it. And I never noticed that Will Smith couldn't act because I loved Will Smith, right? Well, you fast forward to some of the behind the scenes talk from those characters. Will tells the story of how Quincy Jones approached him, and I think they were at like a dinner, and Quincy was like, hey, you want to be in a TV show? I got an idea for a show. And Will was just kind of in the middle, and they all the business people start talking like, yeah, we'll put Will in the show, and blah, 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 blah. And Will said he was sitting at the table like, when is somebody going to tell Quincy and the rest of this crew that I don't know how to act? I don't. Like, I'm a stage performing singer and rapper. I'm used to looking at my crowd, not being on camera and not looking at the camera. Which, honestly, if you look at a lot of the earlier episodes of that show, that's why some of the jokes are him looking at the camera. Because he had trouble not looking at the camera because he's wired to look at his audience. TV's different. But what Quincy was smart enough to figure out, and what Will figured out after the fact, Quincy's response to Will's inability to act, and go back and watch the first season, he struggles to get through some of those scenes. But now he's one of the most highly paid actors and sought after actors on the planet. In fact, he was sought after to be Neo in The Matrix before they went to Keanu Reeves. Now, I'm glad they went to Keanu. I don't think Will would have been the right fit for that. But, sorry, had to plug my favorite movie of all time there. But the solution that Quincy came up with was, we're going to get some insanely talented Broadway actors, right? James Avery, Alfonso Ribeiro, all of these other actors who are insanely skilled at being able to own and control a scene. We'll throw him in the lion's den with them, and Will adapt. He'll be able to glean ability because through osmosis of being around these other people, he will naturally get better. And that happens for everybody. The first band I ever played in, I sucked. But they were willing to let me suck because they put me with literally the best drummer I've ever played with. The best drummer I've ever played with ever in life is in the first band I ever played in. And I've played with some dynamite drummers. You got to know that. I've never played with a bad drummer. But the first drummer I ever played with is leaps and bounds by far the best drummer I've ever played with. And the band knew this kid's never played on stage before, but if he plays with Jay will make him better. And he did. Like, people used to come up to me after shows like, man, you sound so good playing them congas, man. You sound great. And I'm like, what were you listening to? And what they didn't realize was that our drummer, Jason, was so dope that he made everybody around him sound great, including the kid. In fact, my first show, I faked like I was playing because I didn't know what to do. And someone was like, dude, my roommate was like, dude, you wasn't hitting them drums. I saw you. But he made everyone else around him better, right? And so Will, same thing, through osmosis. And I eventually got good because Jay showed me stuff, right, that his dad and, his mentors had taught him. He got me to play on stages that I never should have been on because he was that good. And so going back to Will, being around those other great actors, he adapts. But they also understood that the reason why Will was able to be so successful in music wasn't just because of his talent. I mean, I don't think anybody will argue he's not the best rapper that's ever lived. Who's the judge of that, though? Who cares? The point is his work ethic. Will was able and willing to outwork his shortcomings. Now, granted, he was naturally wired to be on stage because he's charismatic. He's kind of a jolly guy, so he's fun to be around and inspires that in people when he's performing, right? So he's got some natural skills that make him good at that, but he still worked harder than most of the other people around him. So how do you apply this to your life, career, relationships, your happiness? You need to realize that if you're sitting around watching other people win and you're like, well, it's just because they're talented. Okay, I mean, yeah, you do need to have some level of talent to be able to do a thing. But more importantly, the piece that you need to understand is that you need to be adaptable. You need to understand the environment that you're in. You need to be violently self-aware, but also aware of the other people and the circumstances around you, such that you can adapt yourself to the situation. You can't always win everything through brute force. Sometimes you have to take a retreating angle, right? I've given the example of the time, this will be in a couple of videos, where I attacked a bunker in a training exercise head on. You don't attack a bunker head on. That'll get you killed. Doesn't matter how much firepower you have, they have more, and you're going to be dead. But if you learn how to get around the bunker and fish the people out and fight that way, you can win, even though you are, by all intents and purposes, the weaker force in that engagement. You can become the stronger because you're more mobile than a bunker is. You can be a lot more stealthy than a bunker can. A bunker is a bunker. You can see it and hear it once it starts shooting at you. You can get through the woods and navigate in a way that helps you survive and win. So I want you always to be thinking about, how do you adapt to your situation? You know, if you're in a social situation, that's tough. Maybe you work in a place where, let's say you're a hardcore white right-wing conservative, but you work around hardcore left-wing liberals. Well, you got a couple options. One, you may want to go work somewhere else. But if that's not an option for you, you got to adapt. And that doesn't mean you change your values or your morals or your beliefs. It just means you change and adapt your behavior such that you can become a chameleon in any situation. Because if they don't know that you're a hardcore right-wing conservative, because you're not talking about it and you focus on the job instead of focusing on your political views, you can adapt to a situation where now you're surviving and winning. So hope you got a lot out of this video. As always, be sure to share this with everybody. We've got plenty more of these 69 pillars coming your way. I will probably start to upload more of these more often as I'm getting more of them done more quickly. So just stay tuned. We'll get them out and we'll get you through the program. And at the end of this, you'll be able to put all of these pillars together to start seeing. And hopefully, as you're watching this series, you're already starting to apply some of the principles and starting to see some success. So definitely stick with it. Definitely, if you're interested in having me coach you one-on-one, BryantChambers.com/coaching. Absolutely. I've seen the people that have come through the program already are already, even before we finish the session, starting to change the way they think and change the way they act and adapt so that they can start to win in their lives. And as always, friends, I love you much. Remember that we're stronger than I. See you tomorrow.